It is now 2 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to Weekend Express. We're taking a look at what's making headlines on the dailies this morning. Just 11 days to the date set for the repeat presidential election. And on the front page of the Nation newspaper this morning, it says election plan on despite protests. And this is a stalemate the country finds itself in as the Jubilee Party says elections are still on. The electoral body, IEBC, so far still maintains elections will continue to be held on the 26th of October, even as the opposition brigade says this is not legal and is not backed by law. So in studio with me, two lawyers, Joseph Kalende and Nelson Harvey. And there's been a lot of back and forth with the lawyers in the country. You know, the Kenyans seem to be a lot more confused once they hear from lawyers from two sides of the political divide interpreting the same clause of the Constitution. So I'd like to begin with you, Harvey. Just very briefly, on what basis in law is the opposition anchoring the fact that this election on the 26th of October is illegal?
In 2 minutes. In 2013, the Supreme Court said, should an election petition against the president succeed, the candidates who will run in the fresh election will be two. The one who allegedly won and the runners-up. And in the event that one of those candidates withdraws from the race, then there will be a fresh election under the provision of Section 14 of the Elections Act, as read together with Article 138(5)(b) of the Constitution. And 138, in essence, is the one that talks of a runoff, where if there is no winner in the first race, then the first one and the second one will participate in the runoff. So the Supreme Court said a fresh election will be synonymous to a runoff insofar as the candidates concerned will participate. Now, fast forward, in 2017, the Supreme Court said it will not interfere or set aside the decision made in 2013. So the decision in 2013 is still operative law. Now, when Raila Odinga withdrew his candidature, which I've indicated required no completion and submission of Form 24A, then automatically the election schedule for the 26th of October came to an end. And the sequence was for IEBC to set up mechanism for the nomination of candidates in order that we have an election in the manner provided for under Article 138. And that is as clear as daylight. Now, the decision of Justice Mativo came a day after this process had already taken effect. So much as Mativo's decision is challenged for other reasons, even if it was a correct decision, it will not apply because it has already been overtaken by events. And to that extent, therefore, there can never be a legitimate election on the 26th of October.
So I'd like us to analyze that in a bit more context. So, Joseph, according to the opposition, if I'm getting this correctly, first of all, the timeline within which Raila Odinga should sign that Form 24A has also been overtaken by events. What basis in law is the IEBC as well as Jubilee holding the fact that this will be a legitimate election if held on the 26th of October?
One thing, Michelle, I want to assure you, there's some kind of information going around that there's constitutional crisis, that Kenya is facing a legal problem, that we are in uncharted waters. There's nothing like that. Whatever is happening is actually within the law. But the only problem that we are having in this country is that there's a certain group of people, they claim they are the people who wrote the Constitution. But if you look at their legal basis, how they are coming up, they only go to the Constitution at a place where it favors them. Then they come to the 2013 Supreme Court decision where it favors them. Then they leave it. Then they come to the 2017 Constitution decision where it favors them. Then they leave the rest. One thing you should know, in 2013, after the Supreme Court gave out its verdict, one man, Raila Odinga, was outside there telling people that this is a kangaroo court. Before going to the Supreme Court in 2017, what did he say? That the Supreme Court should redeem itself, which means that the 2013 decision is not part and parcel of his going forward. Now, how comes this time round when they are bringing this issue of withdrawal, they are going back to the 2013 decision, part of the 2013 decision. Then the part in which they are going in 2013's decision is a part which is not binding.
All right. Let me just stop you there, because the question right now is not really about Raila Odinga, but as to why Jubilee upholds and why IEBC upholds the fact that it will be a legitimate election on the 26th of October. What basis in law does that have?
IEBC is an institution which is established by the Constitution of Kenya. The Constitution is supreme. 2, IEBC is the only institution mandated to carry out election in this country, unless there's another institution which Nelson Harvey will tell us if they have that can do that election. And one thing I can read from my good friend Harvey here is just mischief. And actually, if you look at these amendments that the president, I hope, is going to append his signature very soon on that, on those amendments to the election law, is to try and reduce those mischief which we are seeing from our friends, our good friends from opposition, and which most likely, the way my good friend has said there, that Chebukati should resign. Because we are anticipating a scenario whereby these people are still insisting no reforms, no election. All avenues have been locked. Now the only avenue here, according to the current Elections Act, the only person who has the mandate of declaring a president-elect is Chebukati.
All right.
So which means if Chebukati resigns and we still have that Elections Act, we will not have a president. Right. And that's what our good friends want.
Let me get your interpretation just before I come to you, Harvey, because Harvey left off at, saying that, what Jubilee says has been overtaken by events in terms of having, a fresh nomination process, in terms of having the other fringe candidates also take place or take part in this election, rather. And so in terms of really whether it is a fresh election preceded by a nomination or a fresh election in the case of a runoff between the two candidates, Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, is it being done constitutionally? Is the law being followed? And will it be an election held in accordance with the law if it is held on the 26th of October?
Yes. And I'm telling you, Michelle, one thing that I want to assure you and assure the rest of Kenyans is that elections can only be carried out in accordance with the law. Our CJ told us that if by any chance the petition goes back to him, he will do the same. So IEBC has no any excuse to do any sham election, because the same people who participated in the election can go back to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So we don't have any... What we are just seeing is some power struggle which don't have any legal basis, but only trying to bring legal aspect in it.
All
and
right.
what have you.
Perhaps, gentlemen, let's now discuss solutions. What are the possible scenarios for the nation as it stands today, Harvey?
Now, Michelle, you're asking my friend here very difficult questions. You know, when you're studying mathematics, we have Malkiat Singh on simple mathematics, and we have advanced mathematics by Professor Nelcon. Now, you see, let me do what Orengo did to Pierre Lumumba and take my good friend here to school. The solution here is simple. We need to follow the law.
Yes.
The Supreme Court has made a decision that has not been set aside. The High Court, however much it disagrees with the decision of the Supreme Court, has no obligation but to comply with that decision. IEBC had made its initial decision to include Raila and Uhuru alone in the ballot on the basis of the Supreme Court decision. Now they are faced with an option to comply with the Supreme Court decision or comply with the High Court decision. You don't need to go to school to know that the Supreme Court decision takes precedence over the High Court decision. Way forward, IEBC should do the correct thing. Unless, of course, IEBC is what we suspect it will have been all along, being an appendage of Jubilee. If it is an appendage of Jubilee, let it continue doing what Jubilee wants and hold a sham election. But if it is an independent constitutional commission, which we taxpayers established, and for which a sum of about 12 billion is about to be spent, then it must down its tools, commence the process in the manner in which the Supreme Court directed, initiate a nomination process, And let's have an election, preferably 120 days from now. Otherwise, we're going to install a dictatorship. And you see, if we have demagogues who support a dictatorship, people with great knowledge or who are supposed to have great knowledge of law support a regime of this kind, then we are destined to a journey that we will not be able to complete.
All right.
We are destined for hell.
Michelle,
yes.
let me agree and disagree with my senior. I agree with Harvey here that going forward, we need to follow the law. Actually, we need to follow the law. But where I disagree with him when he said that decision from the Supreme Court should bind the lower courts, one thing he's not telling you is that that part of the decision they are relying on from the Supreme Court, it is an obiter dictum, so which is not binding to the High Court. And that is what the judge of the High Court, John Mtivo, did. He said that whatever IEBC relied on to exclude the likes of Ekuro Court was not something that was binding to
upon the High Court. All right. Perhaps, you know, even as this continues, let's take a look at the precedents here being set as the opposition still maintains they will not go to this election. IEBC still maintains elections will be held on the 26th. The opposition boycotted the public hearings on the proposed amendments on the election by Jubilee. Jubilee said whether we will come or not, we will go ahead and deliberate on these amendments. They did that. They took that to Parliament without the opposition members of Parliament. Again, they did that and now have passed the laws. If Jubilee, or if NASA rather, or the opposition continues with this stance and they will not participate in this election, and the election is indeed held on the 26th of October, again, who is on the losing end and how does this solve solutions for Kenyans? Because will this be deemed a legitimate election if NASA does not go to the polls? Harvey.
Now, let me set out this quite clearly. We are in a presidential system where Parliament is prorogued by the President elected together with that Parliament. Essentially, the first sitting of Parliament is supposed to be directed by the President-elect. Now, in a situation of this kind, by the time President Uhuru Kenyatta purported to call the first sitting of Parliament, his election was challenged in the Supreme Court. So he had no mandate in law to prorogue Parliament. Now, the Parliament that sat pursuant to the calling by President Uhuru Kenyatta was an illegal Parliament. And anything that has been done by this Parliament is a nullity from the beginning. Let me give you an example. Assuming after the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013, when President Kibaki was still in office, could President Kibaki go to Parliament and address Parliament? No, he couldn't. Could President Kibaki assent to a bill passed by a Parliament elected together with the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta? It didn't. And now these people tend to exploit certain lacunas in the Constitution to achieve an otherwise ill motive. It is as clear as daylight that President Uhuru Kenyatta does not have any authority in law to assent to a bill when his election has been invalidated and when we are going for a next election. Now, if you look at the manner in which these electoral laws were being pursued, it's quite evident that they were being pushed down the throat of Kenyans, whether they wanted it or they didn't want it. And it's a clear indicator that we have reached a situation in time where we've gone back to the 80s and the 70s, where the regime in power, so to speak, wants to obliterate opposition completely. And whatever they do, in my humble opinion, based upon what I've just indicated before, is not in conformity with the Constitution. And as day succeeds night, as soon as President Uhuru Kenyatta pens his signature on those bills, we'll be in court the following hour. We'll not even wait for a second, and they will be quashed by the court. That one, again, my friend, you can take to the bank. And unless and until this regime complies with the law, we'll continuously put them on check until such a time as they exit or they comply with the law. It's as simple as that.
All right, Joseph.
Michelle, you know, Nelson Harvey is one of those people that I really admire in this legal field. And it's quite unfortunate that he's misleading us here. One thing that the Constitution says is this, that President shall address the Parliament. It does not say President-elect. So the President, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, was within the law to address the Constitution. Then the second thing is when he talks about that the President has no powers to append his signature to those bills. You can see it clearly in the Constitution, when the Constitution talks about the temporary incumbency powers that the President has, and the President doesn't have. Is it among those things? No. So the President is within the law. Me, I don't understand these confusions that we are running up and down about them. The President will sign nothing. It will be, I think my good friends will be in court, and I think the court will set the record straight.
All right. So let's focus on the fact that now, 11 days to the set election, Raila Odinga is out of the country for an unspecified amount of time. We do not know when he will be back. But initially, there have been threats even by the opposition, not just in the anti-IEBC protests, but really pretty much an anti-election campaign for certain constituencies to boycott this election. How tenable is that, Harvey, in your view, considering that, many regions in Kenya have, different inhabitants, from different parts of the country? How tenable is it to really ensure that a whole constituency does not go to the polls?
Well, what the reform movement spearheaded by Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga said is that there will be no election. And if President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto want an election, they can have an election in Gatundu, another one in Sugoi. We don't mind. They can go on with it. But we will not be subjected to this exercise where we are forced to sanctify an otherwise very sterile process. It will not happen. And
I mean, there are supporters of Uhuru Kenyatta in Kisumu. There are supporters of Uhuru Kenyatta in Mombasa, in regions that you would term as NASA's stronghold, so to speak.
There's no problem. If they are there, we will not interfere with their right to participate in this wrong. They can vote. We really don't mind. But let them know that they will not force us to go and vote. It's as simple as that. You understand? You see, like Raila Odinga said, I'm not in the ballot. It's like he has left a WhatsApp group, and then the administrator is still pulling him back to the group. So we have said, don't pull us back to this illicit group. If you want to go and drink changa, we are not going to drink changa with you. As we are upright people, we will drink water and tea. So go and do it by yourself. Don't involve us. And for a fact, we have said there is no reason as to why Kenyans should be encumbered with an extra 12 billion Kenya shillings. Yet the more than 50 billion Kenya shillings that was squandered by IEBC has not been explained for. We have a national debt of 5 trillion Kenya shillings right now. We are not able to pay nurses. We're not able to pay clinical officers. We can't pay lecturers. We can't pay teachers. You can see police are killing themselves within their camps. Why? They don't have money. These individuals have taken us to the precipice of a revolution. And if they want it to mature at this particular point in time, then they will have it. But we will not participate in a sham election. It's as clear as daylight. If they want it, so be it. Let them do it, but by themselves. Which
brings me to the question, because the judiciary seemed to have revived itself, in the eyes of Raila Odinga and the opposition after the historic nullification. Many have been asking, if they have so much trust in the judiciary, why doesn't the opposition document all these issues that they say are illegitimate for an election, considering the fact that the Chief Justice himself said, if you bring me an election under the same circumstances, I will have no problem nullifying it in the way I did now. Is this the last means, the last solution that the opposition really has to solve the problem the country is going through?
Now, Michelle, if you look at the Lord's Prayer, there is a fundamental part in it and say, do not lead us into temptations. Simply put, it means if you have a lot of food, please just eat it in your house. Don't eat it in the midst of that person who doesn't have any. We have seen a determined effort by certain individuals who don't want a free and fair election to go to the extent of killing senior officials in the IEBC who have the oversight of the election. You understand? We've seen when this matter was taken to the court, they came out very vehemently with very vicious attacks on the Chief Justice, on the judges. We've seen in countries like Uganda, where a Chief Justice was killed because he didn't toe the line of the dictator. We don't want our judges to be intimidated anymore. We don't want to put them into temptations because the ultimate sovereign power rests with the people, and that power will be manifested in the people in the manner in which it has been manifested in many other areas where people are dissatisfied with a retrogressive regime. I believe that is quite clear. We know the judges are able to do these things, but they are human. We don't want these judges being killed because they're doing the correct thing. And that is why the reform movement has gone to the streets. Let them come to the streets and kill us. They will kill a few of us. They will not finish us. They will run out of tear gas. They will run out of ammunition. But for as long as we have our mothers and our fathers, we'll keep on giving birth to children, and the reform soldiers will continue growing. They will not obliterate.
All right.
This quest for change.
So, based on that, clearly a very volatile situation in the country, two large positions taking very hardline stances. My question still remains, what are the possible solutions for this country 11 days to the 26th of October, Joseph?
The problem, again, you can see from this scenario is that there's this mentality in our politics of it's either my way
or the highway.
Or the highway. The end justifies the meaning. Those are the things that are making us not to move anywhere in this scenario. We are seeing weird allegations from each quarters about this guy has done this. You can hear my good friend saying that one of the IEBC officials was killed by. And yet,
are you denying the fact that Musando was killed? My friend,
yes,
you have to behave like a human being.
But those are just mere. Those are just. You cannot say.
Are those statistics?
You cannot say that it's Jubilee who killed Musando because the matter is still under investigation. You cannot say who in Jubilee. Who?
All right. Let me just hold you there because this is not the basis of our conversation, but I will be coming back to that in just a moment. I want to take some news which is just reaching us in studio this morning, and that is that reports reaching us indicate that a militia in Turkana County said that 7 people, among them 6 students, have been killed by the suspected Toposa militia from the neighboring South Sudan. The reports say the militias attacked Lokichogi Mixed Secondary School and killed 4 boys, 2 girls, and the school's watchman. The attack took place around 3 a.m. this morning. Let's now speak to our correspondent based in Turkana, Rashid Lorogoy, who is joining us by way of phone. Rashid, this is information coming to us this morning, an attack at 3 a.m. Do we have any more information with regard to this attack?
Yes, the attack happened at 3 a.m. in the morning. So far, 6 students were killed, and 1 watchman was also killed. There was a student who was suspended from the school. This boy is a Toposa boy from Southern Sudan. He was schooling at Chogomik Secondary School. So when the boy was suspended, he was suspended because of discipline cases. Then the boy went to South Sudan and mobilized their community, and those community came and attacked the school at night. So far, they also raised the gun. They also raised the gun, and they were able to kill 6 people at once. Already police have already mobilized security staff have been already mobilized.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so we have security on the scene. You speak about a student who was expelled or suspended a few months back, who went to South Sudan and mobilized this militia. Have police arrested anybody so far?
So far, nobody has been arrested because the attack happened last night.
Right.
And already police have mobilized security personnel have been mobilized to control the situation.
What really was the bone of contention here with regard to his suspension? Because we're seeing 6 other students of the same school that have now been killed. Do we have any teachers or perhaps the head of the school who has commented on the situation?
So far, we don't have pictures, but since the place is far from where I am, already the police are... The situation is being now controlled by the police. Already, those militias have already crossed the other side of the country.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, many thanks. That is Rashid Lorogoy, our correspondent from Lodwar. Their information just reaching us once again from Lokichogio in Turkana County that 7 people, among them 6 students, have been killed by suspected Toposa militia from neighboring South Sudan. The reports say the militia attacked Lokichogio Mixed Secondary School and killed 4 boys, 2 girls and a school watchman. The attack took place around 3 a.m. this morning, with a correspondent based in Turkana telling us that one student who had been suspended a few months ago is suspected to have a connection to this attack. More information on this attack as and when we receive it. For now, however, let's get back to our conversation here in studio before we wind up. Gentlemen, still discussing solutions for the situation in the country. Let's not get to the allegations from each side of the political divide. So as it stands, according to the opposition, the only solution is to have a fresh election, or probably 120 days from now. Javi, is there any room for, well, what would we say, consultation, any room for a middle ground to be reached to have Raila Odinga in this election?
The election of 26 October?
Yes.
No way whatsoever. The only middle ground that can be reached is full compliance with the law. And remember when Kofi Annan was last here in 2008, he made it quite clear to Kenyans, please, do not sacrifice your quest for justice for temporary peace, because when you do so, that peace will only be lasting for a limited period of time, and you will perennially be coming back for the quest for justice. And look, it's not about Raila Odinga, because it's not Raila Odinga speaking here. It's not Raila Odinga who was on the streets yesterday. It's not Raila Odinga who was speaking in Mombasa. It's not Raila Odinga who will be in Mamagina Drive tomorrow. This is the voice of the people who want change. And change will only be achieved if people rise up and demand what is due to them. Because if you have a constitution where the ruler does not comply with that constitution, that ruler ceases being a legitimate ruler. And that is the reducible minimum we are saying, comply with the constitution. Let us have a free and fair election. If President Uhuru Kenyatta wins, I'll be the first one to congratulate him. If Raila Odinga wins, I'll be the first one to congratulate him. But let's have a free and fair process, accountable, transparent. What is IEBC hiding from us? Why is the rush to take us to the gauntlet? And we've said we will not participate in that gauntlet.
All right.
And our demand is not an innocuous demand, it's not an illegal demand, it's not an unconstitutional demand. It is being suppressed by brute force. And brute force, nowhere on earth has it ever suppressed the will of the people.
All right. As we wind up, is it perhaps time to have a conversation of having an international mediator, as in the case of Kofi Annan, intervene in the country before it's too late, Joseph?
Maybe that's the route that our good friends from NASA's side have decided to take, because clearly you can see from what Right Honorable Prime Minister is doing in Europe, is asking the international community to come in and help us. To help us in doing what? Interpret our own constitution, interpret our own electoral laws, interpret our own Supreme Court judgment? No. Let us have a scenario whereby our good friend from NASA side accept to follow the law. The Jubilee side is more than ready to follow the law. Let's give IEBC ample time. Let's give IEBC its space to organize itself, to put its house in order, and organize a free and fair election on 26th.
All right, Javi, your final comment, especially with regard to that question, is it time we have somebody from outside the country mediating this crisis?
Absolutely. As we speak right now, the United Nations is oversighting the transition process in the DRC because the term of President Joseph Kabila has come to an end, and he has tried to manipulate that process to ensure that he continues being in power. There is no difference between what is happening in DRC and what is happening in Kenya. It's a high time the international community came in and put sanctions against this illegitimate regime in order that we restore constitutional order to where it's supposed to be. Thereafter, we'll have a free and fair election. Let whoever wins out of this outcome be the leader of this country. But for now, I think the best thing to do is to put on hold what is scheduled for the 26th. I think we can have the president's birthday that day and celebrate. But it's not a date for the election.
All right, all right. Many thanks, gentlemen, for this conversation. We'll continue keeping an eye, of course, on how it works out. Joseph Halende and Nelson Harvey are advocates helping us go through us, making headlines on the dailies this morning. Again, very different interpretations of the Constitution, depending on which side of the lens you are looking at this. But do keep the conversation going on social media. The hashtag is Weekend Express KT. And for now, however, a recap of news just reaching us from Chogio in Turkana County this morning says that 7 people, among them 6 students, have been killed by suspected Toposa militia from the neighboring South Sudan. The reports say the militia attacked Lokichogio Mixed Secondary School, killing 4 boys and 2 girls, as well as one of the school watchmen. The attack, according to our correspondent, Rashid Elorogoy in Turkana there say that the attack happened at around 3 a.m. this morning. Let's get a little more information now from the Kenya Red Cross already on the scene. We're speaking to Michael Biembe there. Michael, many thanks for joining us by way of phone this morning. What more can you tell us with regard to this attack? We understand 7 people have been confirmed dead. Do we have any injuries in the scene?
Well, we have reports of injuries, and we sent our medical team that is already responding on ground together with other agencies, and they have been able to evacuate the injured to hospital, and they are now being managed. We're yet to get the details of the assessment, but the information available is that some might require to be referred, and the Kenya Red Cross is currently organizing for an air ambulance to airlift those that may have serious injuries or who are critical for further treatment away from Kakuma.
Michael, what is the number, perhaps, of those who have been injured, and what kind of injuries are we talking about? And that would speak to what kind of attack it was and what kind of weaponry was being used against the students.
Well, the medical team talk of gunshots, I would say, and we do not know the medics are yet to give the proper detail of what are the number of injuries they have, but quite a number also have other fractures and such like. So it's actually the medical team that makes analysis and choose really which patient is more critical.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. That is Michael Biembe from the Kenya Red Cross there, which is already on the ground at in Turkana there, Lokichogio, where a school has been attacked by a suspected militia from South Sudan there. 7 people have been confirmed dead, among them 6 students, 4 boys, 2 girls, and a watchman at the school. More information coming in there from the Kenya Red Cross. Several students have also sustained injuries, and they are are now planning to airlift them to the various hospitals. More information on this attack as and when we receive it. So far, we understand that one student was suspended a few months ago, is suspected to be at the heart of this attack by militia from South Sudan. We'll be continuing with more on this information as and when we receive it. For now, however, let me take a short commercial break. We'll come back with more on Weekend Express, taking a look at what's making headlines on the international scene.